This is a Conrad alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
Oh, for 5 years. 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you live from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim. Today is October the 20th, 2024, and this is episode 468 of Workshop Radio. We're quickly approaching the big 500, which I think is a huge milestone in the realm of podcasting. But I digress. I am really excited. We got a couple of, well, one name I recognize, one name I don't yet in here. We got a few other folks, but really, I'm not going to beat around the bush tonight because I have a gentleman and a scholar. He literally works at a university, so I'm going to call him a scholar, but in somebody whom I've broke bread with, somebody whom I've drank with, someone whom I've hung out with many occasions. We don't live that far apart, but we decide that the best place to get together is 5,000 miles or 5,000 kilometers away from where we live, actually. But anyway, a really good friend of mine, Ryan Buford, otherwise known as Prepper Dad, is going to come on. He's going to share his story, recent travels, and I don't want to spoil it, so bear with me. Let's bring him on. Mr. Prepper Dad, Ryan, how are you, brother?
Hey, how we doing, everybody?
Good to have you.
Welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
I meant to say in the intro that I don't think you have the record, but you have to be, other than Becky, in the top 3 for sure for appearances on Workshop.
Hey, all right. I'll take it.
I was trying to I could go back and do the math. I probably won't, but I'll say I have, really good intentions, but this has got to be 4 or 5 appearances now.
Yeah, I think we're close to 4. Yeah, sounds about right to me.
That's what I thought. And I maybe brought Brian Alexovich, probably a couple of more from Lots Project, and maybe Carrie Brown, nice. But the top 3 for sure, brother. So I always love having you on.
Those are good names to be affiliated with.
100%. So how's life been treating you? Because we haven't had, normally we get at least a yearly in-person conversation, but because I'm a dick and decided to put family first for a change and totally didn't foresee anything happening about this, but I didn't end up coming to prepper camp. So how's life been treating you since we last spoke?
It's been good and crazy. I've been doing a lot of stuff around the homestead to try and get things ready on my end. As you know, we've got a little bit of an event happening here in the United States in a couple of weeks, and I've been trying to get things ready at ahead of time to be able to weather the storm, so to speak. I live kind of on an old farmstead in the middle of nowhere, and so I've been basically getting my fuels in order and filling the freezer, that kind of stuff. But always a number of projects going on. More chickens, more fish, more food, as much as I can get my hands on. So
I don't know if we talked about fish last time. What are you doing with fish?
Well, I'm trying to kickstart my aquaponic setup again. And this time I'm putting them inside of a greenhouse because it was too hard to keep them alive inside of an outbuilding without causing mold, which is kind of a horrible way, because coincidentally, when you heat water inside of a structure to 60, 70 degrees, when it's 20, 30 degrees outside, then all of a sudden your water goes out of the container and into the room. So I had an entire room full of condensation as a result of trying to keep my fish alive, and it was just too much. So
are you closer to the Seattle, Washington or the Idaho, Washington?
I'm closer to the Idaho, Washington side.
So a bit drier climate, or are you still fairly? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, we still get a fair amount of rain and snowpack for the most part on our end, but it's not like Seattle, thank God, in a lot of ways.
So last time you were on, again, it's been about a year. Mm-hmm. You have been a podcaster for half a decade or better? Yeah. And tell me about it and tell me the changes that happened there.
Yeah. So Colin and I, my son and I had a podcast together called The Next Generation Show, and that was on Prepper Broadcasting Network for a number of years. We stopped it last year. The show had kind of run its course. Colin had grown up, and really the show was about parenting and preparedness and kind of getting your kids on board with preparedness without scaring them, taking their likes and dislikes and really kind of trying to introduce that concept as a form of learning and skill set, really. And he grew up, became an adult, and he's out on his own doing a fantastic job. And at that point, we realized, it's probably time for you to see your own way forward, your own path. And so we ended the show, and just about a month ago, a couple of weeks ago, actually, I was invited to be a co-host on a different podcast over at Prepper Broadcasting. So for those of you who listen to Prepper Broadcasting, there's a podcast called The Rising Republic with L. Douglas Hogan. And he's been hosting it himself for a number of years and decided that he wanted a co-host to drag him through the mud on occasion. So that's where I come in.
Oh, man. I couldn't think of a better co-host. That's awesome.
Yeah. And he and I both have done voice audio, like voiceover work for Sarah Hathaway and her audio drama series. So, we kind of have a little bit of a background together. And he's actually part of the story today with Prepper Camp, because I do know he was actually also hammock camping with me during the hurricane. Not in my hammock, but he had
Hey, dude, we're anarchists here. We're good. Yes. Yeah. So, you know what I just thought of before we go into the main thrust of tonight's show?
Sure.
We talked about Prepper Broadcast Network, and I had a memory go by. So I think I went to 3 prepper camps in a row. I missed this one. Mm-hmm. And so we'll go back 5 years when James from Prepper Broadcast Network reached out to me the first time, wanted me to become part of PBN. I was like, well, yeah, I think so. Let me listen to your guys' stuff for a little bit. So I remember it was a nice fall day, and you guys had just come back from prepper camp that year. I was on the roof of the house next door, and the first episode I chose to listen to was you and Colin on the air travel episode where you talked about flying. You remember that? Or do you remember the episode anyway? Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really popular episode. And I think a lot of people were more interested in how we were able to do that and be effective traveling by air as a prepper when your gear and your weight and your size is all so compact and you have to kind of change things up to make it work. So. It's
funny that this whole, I wasn't even tying this into this, but we just went to Tennessee for a week, and then Becky flew back and she was going to Spain. So she had like a whole bunch of connecting flights to make. We made the horrible, unprepared mistake of putting her prescriptions in her checked bag.
Yeah.
And guess what happened, of course, because we did that, they misplaced her checked bags and she ended up in Spain without any of her medications. So not that, and none of them were life or death, but things that, so we ended up coming up with some solutions that worked, but it was not ideal. And so in the last few days, I just ordered a couple of those TSA bags for all of that stuff. Probably, identical right there. Yep. And so hopefully that will negate that. I can't believe I did that personally, because it was me. I was helping her pack and I never thought about it. And anyway, so we all are unprepared at times, aren't we?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you one story on not to one up or anything, but just because it's fun to share this kind of stuff. My wife and I got married about 5 years ago, and we finally got a chance to go on our honeymoon, because 5 years ago was 2019, and we were planning to go the next summer. Well, everything shut down. So fast forward, we spent a year planning to go to French Polynesia, Bora Bora, Tahiti, all that kind of places. Stay on the little overwater huts. My wife did all the work, planning, getting everything set up. She got all this stuff sorted out and went through a number of different challenges just getting it done. Night before we're ready to go, we're going through all of our bags, and I was like, "Do you have your passport ready?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, it's in the safe upstairs." So I was like, "Do you want to make sure?" She's like, "Oh no, it's fine. It's in the safe upstairs." Well, we got home about 4:30, and about 5:30, she went up to check to grab her passport and get it out. She couldn't find it. Turns out she had put it in the safety deposit box at the bank. And even though we were actually scheduled to leave like 2 days later, the bank wouldn't open for us to get our stuff out because it's on like a timer. Like, once the door's shut, you cannot open it. Like, the managers can't open it. Nobody can. So we wound up changing our entire thing and bumping everything out. Luckily, the travel agents made it work. But she was pretty humble after that about getting on me about what I'm packing and making sure my stuff's ready.
So there's no after hours access. Oh, nope. Man!
So if you guys are keeping cash or firearms or anything valuable in a safety deposit box, just keep in mind, if it gets shut down, locked out, you're not getting it.
That's the equivalent of like buying precious metals and then storing them in an offsite depository, right?
Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
learned. You went to prepper camp this year.
I did.
And it just so happened to be roughly the same time that a rather non-insignificant weather event happened. Yeah. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. So there was as I was leaving, there was a countdown. You know, everybody was kind of checking in with each other. We had, people coming from Minnesota and Illinois, Texas, West Virginia, Florida, a handful of other Minnesota, a couple other different things. So question in chat, prepper camp is a huge event where we all connect, and some of us are speakers. So I'm a speaker at the event. Tim was a speaker at the event last couple of years, if I remember right. And a bunch of the podcasters within prepper broadcasting are also speakers at the event. And this event is it's like the nation's largest preparedness event. And essentially it is a teaching environment where people can go to learn a lot of the aspects about preparedness, from how to butcher meat to how to survive on wild edibles, honey, soap making, there's a canine tactics, using canines as a survival resource, stuff like that. Mine was on freeze drying. That's usually what I talk about. So as a speaker, I was hell-bent on getting there, and I had booked my flights, my hotels, everything 6 months in advance. And I had this sneaking suspicion in the back of my mind that this might be the last year, so I really wanted to make it work out. And then as we were all checking in with each other right before I was getting ready to get on my plane, people were starting to back out of this event. And we're like, I'm looking at the weather. It looks like there's a storm coming. I can see it kind of forming in the Gulf. And historically, as things make landfall, when it comes to hurricanes, they usually hit, 200-300 miles up the coast at most, and then you're done. So I was looking at these weather predictions and the rainfall and the wind speeds and this kind of stuff, and where I was physically going was in the mountains near Saluda, North Carolina, in the western half of North Carolina. And as things kind of accelerated, I was like, well, I'm scheduled to be there. I have a flight, and I am walking into the airport right now. So it's go or no go. What's the story, folks? And some people were backing out. Some people were already there. I was seeing images that everything was good. And so I was like, well, here we go. And got on the plane, flew in to Charlotte. And I think that was on Wednesday. And then I caught a ride with another speaker who does a bug out bag presentation. Jan, anybody, if you've ever gone to prepper camp or plan to go, you have to go to Jan's bug out bag presentation. It's phenomenal. And I've actually learned a lot of stuff from her. But she's always collected me and Colin when we go to prepper camp through Charlotte. And then it's about a 2-hour drive west from there. So we drove up into the mountains and dropped down into the campground. And soon after we got there, it started raining a little bit. And, again, I was watching the weather and the wind patterns and all this kind of stuff. And they were predicting, it went from 6 inches of rain to 10 inches of rain to 12 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. And I got to say it was every bit of that, if not more. It's probably closer to 18 inches of rain. So yeah, basically, I was there during the event, and I don't know if I have I don't have that picture anymore. I actually took a picture of myself, my location.
Okay.
On a GPS weather map showing where the storm was. So it was basically right in the middle of where that storm came through. And I don't know how much of detail you want me to get into, but there was a part during the evening where, let me back up. So I'm flying in with all of my camping gear, all of my clothes and supplies to be able to camp for a week, essentially from Thursday night. Well, not Wednesday, maybe 5 days, 4 or 5 days or something like that. And we could get into some of the equipment and stuff, but essentially I'm hammock camping with an under-quilt and a rain fly. And I knew it was going to rain, and I knew it was going to be a muddy mess. So at the last minute, I decided to ditch my leather boots, and I grabbed rubber boots. And that was a lifesaver. And wow. I'll get into why that was a lifesaver here in a minute. But essentially, I grabbed my rubber boots, and poncho that I used last year was just an alpaca poncho. Super lightweight, warm, comfortable. But this year, I added an outer layer of a different kind of poncho, a weatherproof poncho. That's it's called a Tentsformer from Windrider, and that's one of the links that I sent over to you. Windrider has a lot of the camping gear that I use, and I've not tried this poncho before, but it actually converts into a small tent or a rain fly or tarp. Which is one of the reasons why I was really interested in this particular one. If you combine two of them, it'll make a small tent. And I had no plan of being on the ground, but it's definitely something that I wanted to have as a backup in case my hammock failed or broke or anything during the storm. So I get there and I set up my hammock, and I got everything dialed in. And of course, the first thing I did was set up the rain fly, because the rain was really starting to come down, and at least I could work underneath of it and get the rest of my hammock set up, because I was really concerned about, having a hammock that was absolutely soaking wet when I decided to get into it a couple hours later. So I got that all set up, and then we had some other folks show up that had a couple of vehicles, and because there were so many cancellations from the event from people who were bailing out at the last minute, I was able to upgrade my tent site from Tent City, which is basically just a flat parking lot, essentially, with a couple of hilled areas that kind of surround it, over to one of the primitive campsites, so to speak. So it has basically power and water, and that's it. A camp table and a little burn pit. So I was like, shoot, yeah, I'll take it. Get me a little bit onto some higher ground, and maybe some shielding from the wind that I knew was going to be coming. And so I set up my hammock inside those trees instead of over in Tent City, it turned out to be one of the best decisions of the trip, and probably one of the most fortunate components of it. And so I set my stuff up. I've hammock camped before, and I know what it's like. I know what's expected. I know how to stay dry, and I know the importance of staying dry, which is why I brought those rubber boots. And I also wound up stealing a pair of waders from my neighbor that were like pullovers, hip waders, that were waterproof. And in the event that my pants got soaked, basically, I wanted something that I could wear on top. So these other folks that showed up, I offered them my campsite so that we could at least have a small group together. And Jordan, you remember her. She's one of the instructors, and a couple of her friends, her baby, which was kind of cute, fun to have him around. And a couple of her friends showed up with a brand new tent still in the box.
Oh no.
Yeah. So they had never camped before in their life.
And they no.
A 10-man tent in this little camp spot. So we had 2 10-man tents and then my hammock. And I'm just looking at these guys knowing exactly what's going to happen by tomorrow morning. Because for anybody who's never tent camped before, with that much rain, you're pretty much going to wake up in a puddle. No matter what, you're going to be wet. And I had done enough of that as a kid to know that I didn't want to do that anymore, which is why I prefer to, introduction to camping for sure, 101. But that's one of the reasons why I prefer hammocks, because it's lightweight and it's easy to set up off the ground and dry, which if anybody has ever been wet and knows the importance of staying dry during a camp out, you can understand. But this was beyond any camping trip that I've ever been on before in my life. So I kind of helped these guys out, realized that they had never camped before in their lives. And I had some extra paracord with me, and I went up to the main camp house, and they happened to have some just plain tarps available, but they were like 20 by 16. So I grabbed one as fast as I could and ran some paracord across the whole campsite so that we could at least have some shelter outside of the tents. And that proved to be something that was more valuable than, all these tents and new gears and gadgets that these folks had brought up in their 2 vehicles. But, so I was tent camping, and a lot of the gear that I have, you'll see in the show notes. I kind of have gone cheap with this, so I could get better gear and I could get more expensive gear. But this stuff is about $30 per piece for the hammock, the rainfly, the under-quilt, what else is there? I think there's one more part.
Chair?
Bug net.
Oh no. Yep.
And that kind of stuff. So I all in, it was probably close to $100 for the whole setup, which isn't too bad, and it's enough to where it's disposable. If it should fail, I can replace it. So the other guy, who what's his name, L. Douglas Hogan, who's my future podcast co-host over at the Rising Republic, he also is a hammock camper. He rolled up in his truck, set up his hammock, and his setup is probably closer to $1,000. I mean, he had a fine setup. Nice. And I was really excited, and I was like, oh God, I'm going to get so soaking wet with this $30 gear, and he's going to be high and dry, and this is going to be a showdown of gear. Well, the storm passes over us. So through the course of the night, the rain just doesn't stop. I mean, we're talking probably 75 to 80 decibels on top of the rainfly. And it's basically like standing in the shower, and it was constant all night long. So from the point that I went to bed, roughly 8 o'clock at night, because it was just so miserable out, nobody was doing anything. There were no campfires, nothing was going on. Everybody just kind of crashed out early. So I wound up racking out fairly early, because I figured I may as well just get in here and have some shelter, stay dry, and check on my, because I had a little bit of cell service, like Wi-Fi service. So I'm checking on the weather and stuff. I want to say about 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 or 4 in the morning, the rain stopped for a moment. And then up until this point, the wind had all been coming up from one direction. And after that rain stopped, the wind started coming from the other direction. So I have a feeling, and I wasn't the only one to experience that. And after that, it just continued to rain for a couple more hours, but it tapered off a little bit until the wind came in. The wind was the next variable that was a little bit scary, but once it, when it changed like that, after talking to people the next day, we kind of realized that the storm had actually gone directly over the top of us. And for a few minutes, there was just that little bit of calm right in the eye of the storm. And we had gusts that were probably 30 miles an hour and prevailing constant winds of about 10 to 20 miles an hour, just constant. So about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, we wind up hearing limbs snapping and trees falling. And I mean, I hadn't gotten hardly any sleep all night long, and I'm realizing that this is probably not a good thing. And I'm actually paying more attention to the potential of deadfall or widowmakers up above me as these trees are going back and forth. And just basically threw caution to the wind because I was like, well, I'm a fairly small target, so hopefully it don't happen. But the next morning we get up and it's still raining. But after the second or third branch hit my rain fly, I was like, no, I'm out. I'm going to go and see what I can do to at least go catch a shower or something. And as I'm walking down toward the little shower units they have there, there was a tree on a down power line connected to the bathrooms. So no power. And luckily we had running water because they had it was either gravity fed or they had some kind of backup pumps to run water. So, and it was still a little bit warm. So I took a real quick shower, and because I was already, somewhat wet anyways, just walking from my tent to the deal. Use the blow dryer. No, I did. That was the day before. Those little push button blow dryer units.
Yeah.
I got my, the sleeves on my shirt from about my bicep to my wrist wound up getting soaking wet. So I was using that thing to dry out my sleeves the night before because we still had power. And from then on, it just kind of got a little bit more and more, not scary, but ominous.
Ominous? Okay. Because
it was just the type of situation that we talk about. We prepare for these kind of things. And, all of a sudden, because I went to, before I got out of my hammock that morning, I wound up looking at my cell phone because I was like, hey, what kind of service do I have? When's this weather going to pass? And I had no Wi-Fi. Like, oh, great. I'm looking at my cell phone. I got no cell phone service. Go to the bathroom, realize that I got no power in the bathroom. So I'm using a flashlight to take a leak at 6 a.m. And luckily I had one in my pocket because I keep a flashlight in my pocket. And, the things that I am ready for, I have found as the weekend went on are not as common. And the practice that I've done and the dry runs that I've done at home to build my kit, to build my setup, to build my bag in such a way that I can sustain this type of thing has been done over years. And what really struck me was when I walked over to Tent City the next morning to kind of check on some folks that I went to talk to the night before. And there was maybe 20 people there where normally there was probably 60 or 70 people set up. But because of the storm, a lot of people had backed out. Of the 20 people, maybe 4 of them still had tents. The rest of them had all collapsed, flopped over, rain flies failed. Some of them, they had rain flies set up, those pop-up tents.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some of them were just mangled so bad that they were like twisted into themselves because none of them could withstand the weight of the water that was sitting on top of them because people weren't setting up their rain flies properly. They weren't stringing them out, making them sure that rain went off of them. They were pooling. So a bunch of people over in Tent City lost their tents, either because of the wind not being staked down or, rain crushing them. And that was a little spooky to see that, especially when, this is an event about preparedness and you get these guys that roll up in these nice rigs and they got some great gear once they start pulling it out. And it works great when the weather's good, but I mean, I've been out testing my gear in rain and snow to make sure that it works, to make sure that I can stay dry. And fortunately, I did stay dry throughout the weekend. Do you remember those the hip waders that I told you about?
Yeah.
So soon after I got there, one of the guys in my camp was setting up his tent in shorts and sneakers, and it's raining. And he had like one of those little flimsy Ozark Trail ponchos that you get, the 99-cent ponchos you get from Walmart or whatever. This is all he had.
Oh no.
So I gave him those pants because I knew he wasn't, and my poncho was keeping me dry enough. So I handed those off to him because I was like, dude, you got to stay dry. You can't be messing around here. And by the end of the camp session, by Sunday afternoon, or was it Saturday night, I think, his feet were so soaking wet that he had them up by the fireplace because he was almost getting jungle rot after 2 or 3 days walking around in sneakers and basically rivers through prepper camp. So, quite a bit of destruction, quite a bit of craziness. I have some footage actually from the trip. I don't remember. Did you ever wind up walking up to the campsites?
Yeah. So what I was thinking, where Phil and his wife from, were you near their campsite?
Well, I think I took their old campsite.
Okay.
Because they weren't able to make it. So they were coming up from Louisiana and they saw it on the news and they were like, no way in hell we're messing with this hurricane. We should maybe give the lay of the land. Okay.
So how many miles? It's a few miles off the main road from Saluda, right?
It's about 15, 20 miles, something like that.
Yeah. So you come into Saluda, which is not the bastion of urban life. Like it's still very, in the woods and country. Town. And then you hang a left and you go down a goat trail into the woods. It's paved, but that's about all it is for 15, 20 miles. Then you come to a campground, where Prepper Camp sets up is the low point next to a pond, but it's a great big open field. 1,000, some years, 1,500 people. Would that be fair?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Easy. And it's a massive campground, which has an RV place, then primitive campsites. And then every year they open up the overflow, which is basically a parking lot, a dirt parking lot in the woods that they call Tent City, where tents just hook up or set up. Sorry, hook up. That sounds bad. And yeah, and it would take, what would you say, 15 minutes to walk from?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's from easy. Where Tent City to where Prepper Camp, the main vendor alley is.
It's about a mile walk, I'd say.
Yeah. So yeah, take it from there. Where did things go from there? So people have an idea.
So, and it's like a triangle. So if you think of a Y, you'd have your pond, and then you would go up, and then one Y would have Tent City, and the other Y would be the primitive campsites where I was staying. So, there's a path that connects all three, and they converge on a little, I don't know, it's like a bridge almost, but it's more just a little street with a culvert underneath it, kind of. The next morning, I took footage of that entire street with 6 inches of water flowing and just carving a path down into that culvert. And when I saw that, I realized that this was just the beginning. And mind you, this was on Thursday night.
Mm-hmm.
So I wound up going down to where, what's the guy's name? The guy who does the Fortress Canine?
Oh, Joel Riles. Yeah.
So that's, almost another mile down. I could see that he was starting to pack up his stuff from because he's got like a great big, like 25-foot, 30-foot mobile home, or what do you call them? Like a fifth wheel trailer.
Yeah.
Takes all of his family, all of his gear that he's selling, his harnesses and leashes and t-shirts and stuff like that, tables, all that kind of thing. And then all of his dogs, because he's got, 2 or 3 dogs with him for the presentation for Fortress Canine. And he's packing up his stuff as fast as he can, because where he set up, he had to move it about 50 feet back because his tires nearest the pond were about 6 inches underwater too. So it was starting to come on hot and heavy. Well, I got up to the main cabin where basically we're kind of doing damage control to find out how bad things were outside of our little bubble. Now, one of the things that I was talking about offline with the group was like, hey, come on, guys, it's just rain. It's rain and wind. We're going to be fine. Just show up, run through the storm, get there. We're going to have a fantastic weekend. It'll be great. We got guys peeling off who had already been through hurricanes before. I got another guy who lived just a couple miles north of there, who was like, no way, this is calling for 6 inches or 12 to 18 inches of rain, and I've seen my town flood in 6 inches of rain, so hell no, I'm not going up there. And I was kind of like, okay, that's weird. And I'm kind of like encouraging people, hey, look, let's do this. I mean, we're still kind of in it. I'm showing up. You can make it happen. And then we start to realize that, and my phone doesn't get very good service anyway, but nobody has cell phone service at all. Wi-Fi is down, internet is down, power is down to the entire facility. So we're running generators to be able to see what we can do to get communications out and find out what's going on. Jasmine, JB, she is a gal that we met through Prepper Camp through Prepper Broadcasting, and she lives in Seattle on the west side. She wound up driving. She bid on the work to do all the audio visual for Prepper Camp. So that's your TV screen, microphone, speakers, the whole works. And so she left a week or two prior to get all this stuff down. And she drove from Seattle to North Carolina with gear. Her truck broke down, blew up in South Dakota. I had to do a rental vehicle. Just her whole story is another 2-hour long story on top of this one. But she brought a Starlink with her.
Oh, thank God.
And if she hadn't done that, we would have had zero contact with the outside world to find out what in the world is going on. And we were ahead of the game in that regard, because at least that way we could get somewhat news information or weather reports of what was happening down below. And Pork Chop, I don't know if you remember him. So Pork Chop, he would do a presentation on cast iron cooking, and he's also one of the presenters. One of his buddies does a butchering class, and they usually would make runs back and forth to town to get food, because he would also do a roast, to feed people during the event. And mind you, I packed extra light, and I also I was kind of like, hey, you guys might want to bring some MREs, because I have a feeling if this causes some power outages or whatever, we might be shy on food. Well, it turns out none of the food vendors could make it. But luckily,
I never thought of that.
Yeah. So we have, 250 people there and no food outside of what you brought in with you. So some of us have plenty of food for the weekend. Me, I have, a couple of days worth. And I plan to make sure of that. And one of the things that I left behind that you didn't see in my kit, for those of you who are looking, is a method for cooking stuff. Because I usually would bring a solar oven or something like that, kind of limited on an airplane. But I just didn't bring anything. And instead, I just packed food that I could eat, just solely like out of the package or whatever. So I wouldn't necessarily have to cook, or maybe at most I'd have to ask someone for some boiling water, and that's it. But anyway, so Pork Chop, back to him. The next morning, he decided to go check out the roads. There was no access. So from Saluda, the campground, from the Orchard Lake campground to Saluda, there were trees down everywhere. So he wound up going through with chainsaws to clear a 1-lane path down power lines, through everything, to be able to get people in and out. And he was bringing information back from Saluda and farther into town. And that's at the point where we realized that this was far more significant than any of us realized, and on the mountaintop, that's where it hit, and then it ran off. Sure. So as it ran off, all of these lower levels were just getting those floodwaters that you can't stop that. You can't divert it. And a lot of these towns, just the water level just started climbing. And so we were, power was going out, lines were going out, trees were falling because the ground was so sopping wet. And then all the other stuff that was happening in addition to that was kind of becoming a challenge as well, because no fuel was available inside a 60-70 mile radius at least. So people were going back and forth to try and, find a grocery store or find fuel or something like that. And it was just, it was apocalyptic. And that's the only way that I could describe that whole event. And from
go ahead. Sorry.
I'm thousands of miles from home. So I'm like, am I going to be stuck here for a while? I mean, at least I'm in good company, right?
Yeah.
We got a hog, so we got a food for at least a couple of days. But we might have to, make some decisions here pretty quick on what's going to work. So anyway, you were going to ask a question.
How long did it take Pork Chop to get the road to cut through to get to town? 1 lane?
A couple hours.
Okay.
Yeah. And they went down to Saluda, and then they were getting news from town about like the road closures in from Tennessee and I-26, I believe, that was flooded over. And so then we were heading into Friday, and it was still sopping wet. The vendor areas were sopping wet, so they were like, no, let's just push the vendor set up to Friday and we'll see what we can do. Still want to try and invite people to come if they can make it. And then it become more of like I said, just damage control, try and find out how much we can actually do, what we can provide, but also how we can make sure that we can survive. And it was interesting. And part of the interesting part to me was looking around and realizing that what I had and the gear that I had was set up for me, and I had tested it. And in some cases, I'm surrounded by people that were there to learn. And they were learning the hard way that you test your gear before you take it out, and, make sure that you have enough. There were people that didn't even bring food because they were told that they were going to be food vendors. So people were begging for sandwiches, and, it was really interesting. And of course, we're working with each other. We're trying to make it as comfortable and, just as comfortable as possible for people, because the rest of the weekend was going to be uncomfortable. It was still wet, but I think the weirdest thing was seeing the lot empty. I mean, it was not a normal prepper camp by any means, because usually you'd see thousands of people walking through.
Yeah.
Weather turns, sun comes out, and everything's fine, but then there's no people there. There were people there, but it was just a lot of the speakers didn't show because they couldn't make it. A lot of the attendees couldn't make it. I mean, probably a tenth of the people who signed up didn't even get a chance to get there.
Wow.
So it was something else. And I mean, I am thankful that I made it out fine, dry, no issues. I'm thankful that I had enough equipment and gear to share and, try and help people out. But I think more than that, I'm really thankful that I had at least had some experience with actual camping, bushcraft, that kind of stuff, to be able to say, this will be okay. It's going to be wet and miserable, but we're going to be fine. Don't do this, this, and this. Stay dry, conserve fuel, make sure that you can at least save enough juice for a phone call once you get out. make sure you have some cash, that kind of stuff. So it was an interesting psychological experiment, to say the least, and to see who was really prepared and who was not showing up to an event about preparedness.
So what would you say some of the biggest mistakes you saw people make?
Shoes, 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
No questions. People were wearing sneakers and socks. Okay. Some people were wearing leather boots. And I don't think people realize the importance of keeping your feet dry. And I mean, I know in the military they beat it into your head. I've never been in the military, but I can remember one time when I was out hiking with my grandpa, who was a World War II vet. He served in the Navy and wound up, one of the waves of D-Day, first or second wave in Normandy. And he came back and he was just he was a scary guy. We went on a little hike one weekend when it was just me and my twin brother. And there was a little tiny pond with right alongside this path that we were hiking on. And he kept telling me, don't get too close to that pond. Don't get too close to that pond. Stay on the trail, stay on the trail. Well, I wanted to go over there and kick the cattails. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, I slipped and fell into it. Next thing I know, I've got his, iron fist pulling me out of the water and dragging me basically from the trail all the way back to his truck. Dropped my pants, took my shoes off, sat in the truck. And I didn't realize as a kid that what he was doing was preventing me from getting any kind of hypothermia or anything of that, of that sort, because I wasn't dressed for it. I mean, I didn't have the gear for it. And as a kid, I didn't know any different. And I think that's what I realized, is that we have a bunch of adults around who don't know any better. And that, to me, was very scary. And the shoes was the biggest part of it. Knowing what kind of shoes that you need to wear, that it's massive. Hold on one second. I'm going to turn the light on so you can see.
Sure. I was just going to say, I think the sun's coming down on you. So I'll tell a little story here, guys, while Ryan's bringing this up. But I can't remember exactly what day it was. I want to say either Saturday or Sunday morning.
All right. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I was just going to tell the story about your little proof of life photo that you sent to me. If you remember that. Yeah. So I get a text message from a buddy of mine named Bob Lester, who lives in Ohio. And he actually, Joel Riles and his wife Wendy and family, they have set up their entire canine operation on Bob's property in Ohio, because we've all met through community, and that's what community does. So Bob was a little concerned about Joel and Wendy and the kids, because no one in our community, and this is what's really cool, in our extended community, no one had heard from Joel in at least 48 hours, probably 72. And that's not real normal for Joel and for, the community at large. So Bob started reaching out to a few different people, and he said, "Hey, don't you know the guys at Prepper Camp?" And yeah, I do. And so I said, well, all I can do, I checked, first thing I did was check the campground website, and they said there was a post on there that said, once a day, we'll be checking the email, things like that. And I thought, all right, I'll give Ryan a message. So I messaged Ryan, and within a couple hours, you had happened to hop on, and you were gracious enough to check in with the community, let us know you were doing good. And you said, yep, Joel's good. And then the smart ass that Ryan is, about a half hour later, he sends me a photo. Here's your proof of life. And he had a picture of him and Joel side by side, looking like drowned rats. But to me, I thought, a guy from Ohio messaged a dude in Alberta, Canada, who then messages one of his closest friends in the middle of the woods in North Carolina, who's then able to check on another good friend of his. And to me, that blew me out of the water, man.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, people don't realize the value of the network that you have with people and being able to reach out. Maybe it's a coworker or a friend or something like that. I had people reaching out to me to see if I was okay, and I didn't even realize it until I had the ability to get an internet connection again. So sometimes 24 hours goes by, 36 hours goes by, 48 hours goes by. You got no word from anybody. That's a little spooky, especially when you're starting to hear what's happening down below. So I'm glad I was able to do that. And, it was the kind of thing where I was able to just blast out a bunch of communication right at once, because like what people don't realize is when you have limited time and resources, you have to conserve what you have and be smart about even your communications in and out. Like, hey, mom and dad, I'm okay. Hey, baby doll, I'm good. We're, everything's fine here. Even if they don't know what's going on in the moment, at least they know that I'm okay. And, even checking in with some of these groups to find out if there was anything significant with other people. I just happened to stumble across that. And luckily, it worked out, for the better. But having a good, strong network of friends and people all around the world, really all around the world, in some cases, it's worthwhile. And there are avenues to get communications in and out if you have a wide enough network. What's it, 6 degrees of separation or something like that?
Yeah. If you want to get a message to Kevin Bacon, you only got to tell 5 people, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
I grew up in a the mid 80s evangelical Christian home, and we used to have, next to our phone, we had the old fashioned prayer chain, they would call it. And if something was going wrong, if somebody was having something that needed their prayer request, they wanted people to pray for, the one person would call the 6 people at the top of the list. And each of those 6 people would call the 6 people below them. So you make 6 calls, and all of a sudden you've hit 43 people.
Huh.
And then at the bottom there'd be one more chain. So it would work almost like a pyramid scheme, but in a good way. And that was so you could just get the information to one person. Before, of course, Facebook groups and all that stuff, but that's what it kind of reminded me of, is you get it into a group and then everyone else can pass it along.
Yeah.
So you said what you saw the biggest mistake people made. Was there anything you would have done differently personally? Because I know you did well, but I mean, it still would have been a pain. But what, anything at all that you've thought about since that you're like, damn, I wish I'd have had that, or I wish I'd have done something different?
I think about, I don't know if it's a survivor's remorse kind of thing, but I actually wish that I would have stayed longer, because I think I could have helped a lot of people. Just by being someone who knows how to run a chainsaw, or, rig things properly, run equipment, that kind of stuff. I was really as we were coming down off of the mountain at the end of the weekend, I could see how much damage was caused just from the highway with power lines out. And as I was seeing this stuff, I was doing math in my head, realizing that this isn't going to be like a 2-week storm where people are going to have power up in a couple of weeks, or 2 months. This is going to be a magnitude of years getting things back to the way they are supposed to be. And I saw from where I was in Saluda headed back east to Charlotte, that wasn't even the worst of it. The worst was up north, where that storm, because the storm just basically headed up north through us into Asheville and Black Mountain,
which we were through there last fall. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't know, like if I could have done something different, I would have taken an extra week or 2 off just to help, especially seeing the way FEMA and some of these agencies have failed miserably over there.
I got a question here from the delinquents. This one's from, speaking of really good buddies from the community, this is Patrick Rorman that makes the neck knives.
Yeah.
Have you seen the neck knife? Oh, yeah. So he said, so how many people were biffed about not being, I think that's supposed to be prepared enough, and expecting others to provide for them?
Well, that's one thing about being at a camp full of preppers or people who are planning to be preppers. There's almost never a need, which is nice. And in fact, if I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else with anybody else through a storm like that, really. So there wasn't a ton of people like that. What we did see were some folks, like the brand new people, who were like, oh, I don't have enough baby formula, or, I don't have enough this or that, or they were planning to just set up camp and then go to town the next day and buy all their food and supplies and stuff. So I didn't see a ton of that. There were a couple of offhand folks, and for the most part, we were able to take care of them. So Pork Chop and his his coworker, so to speak, they had already brought up meat that they were butchering as part of a class and then cooking as part of a class. Well, so they had enough meat to get by when it came to food, but there were enough people jumping in to help people before they realized that they had a need or a desire for something. So like setting up the tarp, because in my own campsite, I was like, wow, this is going to be wet all weekend if we don't have at least some kind of overhang to get us by, and set up a camp stove and cook, because even a propane stove, if you're trying to cook and you got rain coming down on it, you're suffering. So I'm sorry.
It's like
but
when you ask a bunch of preppers if anybody has a knife, and everybody wants to get their knife out as quick as they can because everybody wants to help, right?
Yeah. And unfortunately, like I'm kind of in that group of people who can't pack that stuff. So I was, I wasn't necessarily asking for handouts, but people know me, and because of my connections and relationships that I've built with people, I wasn't wanting for anything, except for maybe my Leatherman, but I couldn't bring that, and I could do without. So
Dixon had one. It's similar, but a little different bent to it. It says, was there a definitive line between people who think about being useful and the ones that are completely lost? And no. I think no. So it was like degrees of each.
Yeah. And I think that's what you find, in most cases. There were some people that I could tell they were struggling from the beginning, and that they were going to have a hard time. Kind of like when you walk into, your first day of high school as a senior, you kind of know the kids that are going to struggle, and then the ones that are going to be okay, So that I kind of have that perception. When I look at certain people, I can usually tell, if they're dressed appropriately, if they're physically fit and capable of at least walking a mile from one part of the campsite to another, if they've got the right equipment with them or have access to it, shelter, that kind of stuff. So, but you got to realize that a lot of the people that were at this event are there to learn. So by default, there is a gradient there. There's a spectrum of people who might have some supplies, or might have seen a couple of YouTube videos, or might have gone camping before once or twice, but never really understood what happens when you live through one of these experiences that we talk about all the time, with no cell service, no power, no internet, hardly any running water, sanitation supplies potentially dwindling out, food, dwindling potentially over time, even access to emergency services. If those guys didn't cut those trees out of the way, at least one lane, there's no way we'd have been able to get out, or anybody else would have been able to get in, because who the hell cares about a bunch of people camping on the top of a mountain,
right,
when you've got power outages over 100 different counties in North Carolina and Tennessee, or was it Tennessee? Yeah, Tennessee.
Yeah, East Tennessee, North Carolina.
Yeah. So we were the bottom of the list, but luckily we had enough stuff to get us by. So no definitive line. The line was, in some ways, the people who showed up and the people who didn't. But also, the people who showed up and were used to this kind of thing versus those who had never done it before in their lives. And that was a pretty stark contrast.
And to be honest, I don't know. I mean, I guess if the storm was coming, I would have thought about it. But to have the forethought to bring a chainsaw with you was fairly impressive, considering.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, that's one thing that I was going to stop at Harbor Freight on the way there to grab a commando saw, because I had a feeling that I might need to use one, but we didn't stop on the way, so I wound up not grabbing one. And something like that would have been useful for me, because it's lightweight and packable. So if I, for some reason, had to walk out in my rubber boots, technically I could. But it's something that I'm definitely adding to my pack. I don't know if I can get it on a plane, but so I'm going to have to, maybe I'll get one while I'm here and see if I can fly home with it. But that's the kind of, and there were other people who, and the thing was that, yeah, those people had chainsaws. As we started to leave, the ground didn't dry up. It just, you had the weight of these trees starting to lean that might not have fallen during the storm. So after they cleared the path, they had to go out and clear it again so that we could get out. And there were even other people who were clearing paths as the event was coming to an end, and they were trying to get out the next morning. So, and they were out with handsaws, just taking out branches so that they could at least get their stuff off. And the gal that I drove with, or she drove her truck and her little trailer that she uses for camping. And she said the biggest thing that she learned is that she's going to put gas cans on her vehicle, and she's going to keep one of those little DeWalt chainsaws, those little handheld, even a 6 or 8 inch one, just a little dinky one, enough to where if you're skilled enough with a chainsaw that you can do some work, and maybe a file so that you can file the thing and keep yourself going. So there was a lot of lessons to be learned, and on my part, there wasn't a whole lot on the lesson side for me, which is aside from being, for me, the big lesson was the other people.
Sure.
Like realizing that there are people like me or us who are capable or willing or in an environment who can do certain things or know certain things, but you don't get to choose the people you're with all the time.
Right. And
if this same thing happened, right now, where I'm, another 1,200 miles from home, I'm in a much different situation here. So I'm not going to have the same kind of help. I'm probably not going to be surrounded by the same kind of people. And there's going to be some other barriers there. So I think one of the things with me, the biggest lesson would have been on that side, like, who are you with? And if you're not with anybody how are you going to get by? Just your good looks, your cash, what gear you have on you, how much you can barter your way out of a situation or into a situation or a ride. So I think the reality of how many people are unprepared struck me, because I live in this world, and we talk all the time. So we talk about the same stuff. We're like, oh, if this is going to happen, this is going to be like this. Well, I wasn't expecting that, the level of people that weren't ready, and not just on the mountain. I'm talking everywhere. Sure. As soon as we got down, it was just wall to wall people, no gas anywhere, and lines out 3, 4, 5 blocks down for a gas station waiting to be able to pay cash. And I was just
burning gas while they're sitting there, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, we've passed a little bit over an hour here, so we'll start winding her down a little bit. But can you give a quick? I guess you've kind of talked a little bit about your gear. Okay, I got one question first. What was there any piece of gear that you wish you had with you? I think maybe we've touched on it a little bit, but that you didn't have that would have made life a little more comfortable or a little more adaptable.
I don't even have it with me now. God damn it. My Leatherman. I absolutely hate traveling without it. I carry a Leatherman Wave everywhere with me, or a Leatherman Sidekick. I'm sorry. And I think that is one thing that I would have wished I had. Even that has a little saw blade on it. It's only about that long, but it's better than what I had, which was nothing. So
there is a TSA friendly Leatherman, which isn't ideal, but they do make one. Mm-hmm. And if you're flying within Canada, any of the Leathermans with a less than a 3-inch blade, you can actually fly with now. But that's Canada. But there is a TSA friendly Leatherman, which isn't great, but it's better than nothing just in the future. So
gear, I mean, I've kind of really pared down my gear, and on the gear side, I didn't have any failures, which was surprising to me. I was expecting to have something fail. There was one guy. So the next morning, when I was breaking camp, the other guy, who I'm now podcasting with, he was also in a hammock, and I was like, I wonder if he cleared his campsite before he left, because he left before daybreak.
Okay.
And so I went up there, and I found his hammock straps and a little bag and a little pillow. And so I have yet to give him shit about that, but that is one thing that I was like, that's a catastrophic failure, because by the time you go and you jump to your next location, wherever you are, if you don't have your hammock straps, then what are you going to tie your hammock off to? You're going to be on the ground. So that was kind of an interesting one to me. And I pack my stuff in a specific way so that I know that I have everything and keep it up off the ground so I don't lose it or get it wet. So the methods that I use are kind of in line with that, but yeah, you can't do that.
I like this here from Lone Canadian. Speaking of community, good friend of mine who's only 20 minutes away.
Nice.
And we found each other through James Wesley Rawls when he was on the show. So that tells you that's how we connected. But anyway, so he says, carry cash. To quote Commander Zero, you'll need $50 bills more than you'll need 50 caliber. And I don't disagree 100%. Because, the more practicality of it.
And I took a little extra cash out on this trip, thinking, hey, I want to support the vendors and do all this kind of stuff when I get there. And there was an ATM on site, turns out, but of course nobody could use it. So when this all happened and I realized that I needed to conserve resources, I wound up pulling back from that and not spending money at the event, because I wanted to make sure that if we had to pay cash to get back, that I had enough cash to be able to do that. So I held back a little bit for that reason, because the cash that I pulled out at the airport was infinitely valuable. I mean, it was, But
what about? Do you want to go? Do you have a couple more minutes, or
I'm all night. So for as long as you want to roll with this,
let's just real quick here. Let me see if I can bring up. I'm going to bring up. Maybe we'll just pick 5 or 6 items.
Okay.
And have a little bit of fun. This will be more fun for the video people than the ones listening to this on the audio after the fact, but that's okay. We will. Let's just, so I'm going to grab a couple of items. Let's see. Let's grab the Lifesaver portable solar charger first.
Oh, I didn't bring that with me.
Nope. I'll just bring it up. Hang on. I'll share my screen as soon as I, give me one sec here, guys. We'll bring it up on the screen, and then Ryan can talk a little bit about what we've got here. So I've gotten better at doing this live. It's not Memorex, but we do it, so entire screen. There you go. Share. And there we go. Okay.
So this little guy is an amazing trinket. I can't see the weight on there, the weight capacity. You might have to shout that out.
Yep. 5 ounces.
5 ounces, like next to nothing. This thing is an amazing tool. It has a single USB port out, and I think it's like, I don't remember the power. It's got a power cell in it. So as the solar is running, it's charging a battery.
3,200 milliamp hours. So not insignificant.
Right. Not a ton, but not insignificant either. So, but it also has pass-through charging. So you can plug into this device and charge your cell phone or your two-way radios or whatever, and still be charging the battery inside as well. And what's nice about it is you can roll it out when it's sunny out, give it a charge, and at night when you have no sun but you need a little juice to get a message out, you can use it as basically a power bank. What's cool about these is you can actually, what does it say on there? 3,200 milliamp hours.
3,200. Yep.
The battery inside of it, you can actually take it out. If you're good at soldering or building radios or whatever, you can take that battery out and put one in that has a significantly higher capacity.
Oh, really?
Yep. And they just get a rechargeable one and it'll work. It's like I don't know what the name of the battery is, but if you take it out, you can kind of see what it is. They're very expensive. These are made out of Power Film Solar, which is a company out of Iowa, I believe, in the United States, and they make some amazing gear. It's not cheap, but I take this with me anytime I go camping or packing. I didn't pack it with me on this particular trip, but I usually do just for that purpose.
I've been eyeing this up from you for 3 years now. I keep swearing I'm going to get one, but every time I come on here, it says only available for direct purchase in the United States. But I will. I have an American PO box now, so I'm okay. So I am going to get one of these because they're awesome.
I would. I mean, I will say the price is almost doubled since I got mine.
Yeah, they're, what is it now? 100 and
Almost
oh no, 219. Wow, that's gone up since last time I looked.
Yeah,
but that's fair.
And for what they are, for what you get, they are a significant powerhouse when it comes to lightweight packing, camping, glove box, whatever. It's designed. I don't know if you saw that, but it's got a couple of little hook loops on it so that you can connect it, hang it, put it on your backpack or whatever, so that if you're hiking or whatever, it'll charge the cell or whatever you connect it to.
So we get Vibram's Men 5-Finger Trail Hiking Shoe.
Yeah. So this was my backup. And there's a reason this is my backup. So I wore my rubber boots knowing that I was going to get my feet wet. And these were something that I have worn to prepper camp before. A lot of people use these for hiking or training. And I find that they are extremely comfortable over long distances. And they allow me to feel better with my feet. So, as long as I'm not on any construction sites, they're actually a really useful tool. But what's really appealing with these is the weight. And again, I didn't bring these with me. I think
okay.
the weight of those...
Hang on, I'll bring them up here for you. We're on Amazon now, guys, and we're doing all 7 ounces.
Yeah, 7 ounces. So less than half a pound.
Yeah.
For both of your shoes. And they're like leather, and they've got kind of a canvasy material on the top. They take a while to dry, which is one of the reasons why I was a little hesitant to bring them, but they do breathe through the entire top. So the thinking behind this was that if my rubber boots failed, got a hole in them, ripped, cut, whatever, or lost, stolen, that I would have these as a backup and still be able to move. A lot of people don't consider their footwear when it comes to camping and having a backup. So even if these got wet, I wouldn't be as miserable as the guys who are wearing sneakers and socks. These are not designed to be worn with socks. They're designed to be worn barefoot so your feet can breathe while still providing protection from the bottom.
We got this one here, No Rinse Cleanser.
So this is a little bit different. Most people don't consider their sanitation when it comes to camping. And this is a homebrew cleaner that I use at home for my brewing equipment. Usually you'll use these in like a 5-gallon carboy. And it comes in a powder. I think I might actually have it with me. I mean, it's just a white powder like you would. And so it looks like cocaine, basically. There's my camera.
I bet you have fun. Yeah.
I've never had issues getting through security with it. But it's a detergent, and it's a one-step sanitizer. So for cleaning dishes or cleaning your hands or cleaning equipment or anything like that, it's really effective for that purpose. And the thing is it's not in a liquid form. I think it dilutes from like 1 teaspoon per gallon.
Yep,
something
1
like that.
tablespoon per 1 gallon of warm water.
So for what I brought, 1 tablespoon, I could have provided maybe 5 gallons. Well, probably more than 5 gallons, maybe 10 to 15 gallons of sanitary water, which could have been used for cleaning or sanitation in the event that we were out of that kind of stuff. I don't think it's potassium sorbate. It is...
I'll see if I can find the active ingredient, because this reminds me of like, was it Starry San or Sanny Star or something that I used in home brewing? It's you don't have to rinse it afterwards, right?
Yep, that's what this is. It's essentially the same thing.
Let's see if we can find active oxygen. So maybe it's like OxyClean, is it?
It's probably similar to that, yeah.
Okay, I don't know if we can find. They don't always list it. They do well, but All right, I'll see if I can find it out for those listening afterwards.
Sure. But those are, I mean, that's kind of like a camping hack. Instead of taking liquid soaps, take a powdered soap and make your own. And I actually keep a lot of this stuff on the homestead in the event that we have major power outages or something like that. If we have issues with water, then or running water, then I can at least sanitize dishes and stuff like that.
This one here looks like it would make a really good scarecrow, but
yes.
What do we got here, Ryan?
Well, it'll make a really good prepper out of you. That's what it's going to make. This is an amazing poncho, probably one of the best that I've had the pleasure of being able to survive a hurricane in. But essentially, it is a poncho with 3-point tie-offs and specific anchor points to where you can turn it into a tent or shelter. If you combine two of them, it forms a full tent. One of them, it makes a pup tent. This is why, see that picture with a guy with a backpack on? That's
right there,
why
yeah.
I got that. Because this poncho is large enough to fit over a backpack, and most ponchos won't. So, and you can see how long it is, all the way down to his ankles.
Yep.
That's why I was able to stay dry wearing rubber boots. Because I just wore my pants outside the rubber boots, and anything that ran off my pants ran down the rubber boots. So I stayed dry the entire weekend in that, with the exception of from my biceps to my hands.
Every time you come on here, I see more gear that, well, we did 2 episodes on the USB prepping, and that was a hell of a lot of fun. That was. Let's pick one more here. Anything in particular you'd like to highlight? I'm going
to show you one thing that I got as a speaker.
Okay, let's bring you in close here.
So this is a mesh-tastic sender receiver.
Yep.
So all of the speakers at Prepper Camp got one of these. It's about the size of a pager. It's USB-C rechargeable.
Nice.
You can plug it into a solar unit. It has a small antenna on it. And if you want, you can use this as a beacon, as a repeater, as a receiver, and you can jump line of sight from unit to unit. And what it does is it allows you to send a Bluetooth message from your phone to the unit, and the unit will relay that message to any units within line of sight. It can jump up to like 8 times.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that was significant about this is Rick Austin, who sets up Prepper Camp, has been using these as a community watch setup.
Oh.
So he can send these messages in areas where you don't have cell signal.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll relay and bounce between other people's till it gets to the end person. You don't need a license to use it. You do need an app, and you need a phone capable of handling it. Unfortunately, my phone is too old and my laptop is too old, so I need to upgrade my stuff in order to get this to work properly. But if you do, then you can use others to be able to send messages using only a Bluetooth. Why is that important? Well, if you go through a hurricane and the cell towers get destroyed, or if we have a terrorist attack like we did on September 11th, and all of a sudden you can't send a single text message out, these run on a different frequency. They run on the same frequency as your smart devices, and it's basically a radio frequency. And so as long as I can make a Bluetooth connection to this with my phone or my computer, I can send a message out. So there's a lot of value in this little dinky thing. It weighs maybe 2 ounces or 3 ounces. And it's also a GPS tracking device. So
really,
you can use it if you go hunting or out on your 4-wheeler or whatever, and be able to track someone else, or if you want to put it on your equipment, your vehicles, or throw it in your backpack, or if you want to try and map something out, you can. Chin Gibson put together an amazing presentation on this, and he's got some interesting concepts where you can take something like this, take the USB port, plug it directly into a battery powered solar system, like one of the little lamps you get at Home Depot, and run it up on top of a water tower with some magnets on the bottom, and all of a sudden you got line of sight to everywhere that, if you have line of sight to that water tower, you have line of sight to everything that water tower can see. So some interesting concepts here, even if you just throw it up in a tree, stuff like that. Cost wise, I want to say that it's like a little electronic thing that goes inside of it, and then the antenna maybe takes $20 to $30, and then this is like a 3D printed case. So with the case, it's probably $50 to $60, maybe up to $100 per unit. So definitely worth looking into. The app is Mesh-tastic. And the question in chat, can you prevent people from tracking you? Yes, the GPS option is actually it's an option. You can turn on or off. I say that because you might want it on if you go hunting. This is an amazing tool for something like that, because you can just clip it to your bag, stash it somewhere, and if you have your phone with you, even if you don't have cell service, you do have the potential to be able to send a message.
So go ahead.
To my knowledge, there's no service cost. It's all free at this point because it's running on low frequency radio waves. At this point, and at this point, there's no cost associated with it. So that's why it's kind of a valuable tool to keep in your back pocket.
Now, I know it's been almost 2 years, but when we went to the Thrivalist Fair a couple of years ago, and we had the roundtable discussion, there was a guy there named Jake from Ravenwood Acres. Yeah. He was just getting ready to retire from military, and he has since done that. He come on the show either late spring or early summer and did a whole episode on the Mesh-tastic network. And so if anybody out there is looking, go back. It's not that far back. It's less than 20 episodes back. Somebody else asked about it in Telegram the other day, but listen to that one first. And it sounds like, by all the interesting questions, I should probably have Jake back on to do another one, because people are really interested in this right now.
As they should be. I mean, backup communications are it. I mean,
100%. Yeah. They're not so sexy, but boy, they get you out a lot of trouble sometime, don't they?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, so, I did want to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
So one interesting thing that happened, we were kind of setting up camp and all this kind of stuff, and this guy rolls up and decides, he's like, "Hey, I got nowhere else to camp. Do you guys mind if I throw a tent up wherever?" And I'm like, "Sure, yeah, no problem. Set it up." Turns out it was EJ Snyder.
Really?
Yeah. So for those of you guys who don't know, he was on the Alone or Naked and Afraid. Several years.
He was at KSL I was at last spring. So yeah, okay.
So that was kind of cool, because he was just kind of hanging out with us in our campground, shooting the shit and drinking on the side. It was actually really interesting to hear some of his stories about, behind the scenes on the show and stuff. It was pretty cool.
He made it okay, did he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured he would. All right, so I got one more question for you, and then we'll kind of tie things up. But so, all things considered, if you go back to the day before, when you were going to the airport and you had to make the decision, go or no go, would you do it again?
Yes.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat. And I would probably stay longer. I did not, I didn't tell my wife how bad the storm was.
Sure.
I figured she was paying attention, but I also didn't want to scare her. And so, but she knew that, it was going to be wet. And I told her that it was going to be wet. So I think I got back and she was like, "Well, isn't part of preparedness not going headfirst into that kind of stuff?" And I couldn't argue that point. So
she's not wrong.
She's not. No.
And I wouldn't judge anybody who did otherwise, but I get it. That's because I've heard many people say that the best decision you can make is to bug out ahead of a storm. Not always the case, but
instead of flying into it.
But yeah, so where can people, I was going to say where can they look, but I mean, they can still listen to old episodes, but where can people follow up with you at this point there, Purple Dad?
So Twitter is a good way if you want to reach out to me. I'm also in the, what's our group? Telegram?
Telegram, yep.
So I'm in the Telegram group. Twitter, you can find me at Dad Prepper. So it's Prepper Dad at Dad Prepper. And check out our new podcast over at the Rising Republic on Prepper Broadcasting, but it's also, I think, on the main streaming services. Me and L. Douglas Hogan, he's over there. He's got a great booming voice, just like mine. So, and we talk all kinds of stuff about, politics and conspiracy theories and, kind of where we are headed as a nation and some of the things that we're paying attention to and watching out for. So,
well, brother, every time
it'll be interesting.
I think I started this podcast many moons ago, simply so I'd have an excuse to talk to people that I like to talk to. And it works out every time. It's good because I'm not the type of dude who will just pick up and talk on the phone. I'm just not that guy. I never have been, and I can't change who I am. But one thing I sure as hell love doing is having good friends like you on here so we can sit and chat. So thanks again for coming on and sharing your story, brother. Yeah,
absolutely. Sorry if we went over a little bit. Hopefully it was a worthwhile story.
Oh, it was great. I appreciate it. But if you want to hang in the background for just a second, I'll close up and we'll be good. Go ahead.
I did want to try and I think Samaritan's Purse.
Oh, go for it.
I did want to try and let folks know if they want to help out with victims of the Helene, to check out Samaritan's Purse. That's one of the ones that is actually doing good work over there. So if you feel the need or the calling to donate to the cause, please do check that out.
Perfect. And another one is Grindstone Ministries.
Yes.
They're independent. Actually had the pleasure of interviewing him about 10 days ago at Self-Reliance Festival. And they were in North Carolina, but they came back and then they were going back again. So what an incredible dude. But they're two great charities there, folks, that if you want to help, go and do it. So
cool. But thanks everybody. I appreciate you having me back on, Tim. It's always a blast. And if anybody wants to reach
invitation for you anytime you want to come back and try to break the record,
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, brother. I'll be right back with you here. Hang on one sec. All right, guys. I loved it. How could you not love having Ryan on here? Every single time I bring him on, we just have a hell of a time. The guy lives what he says. And, I've broke bread with him. I've drank bourbon with him. And, he drinks wine, of course. But, there is that. But we'll, support him with his new podcast venture. But again, like he said, if you feel so inclined, reach out to Samaritan's Purse and donate there if you need to. And one thing I wanted to mention as we're closing up, because this is the place where we all hang out and where all of us get to communicate. But I threw the link in the description. It's in every description. But for the Telegram group, if you guys want to come by and join, it's just t.me/ToolmanTim's Workshop. Come by. We don't just allow everybody in because we get a lot of crypto scammers. But as soon as you say, hey, I'm real, we'll put you in there. So anyway, folks, I appreciate you. I'm glad we were back with yet another Sunday Live, and look forward to this Thursday coming. We will have yet another This Week in Prepping. And guys, as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.